Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jared Grubb. I'm the managing partner of Clifford Chance in Istanbul. Apologies, you may or may not be able to see me. I'm having a few technical difficulties. But hopefully, I think our other panelists are on. Although, once again, I think technical difficulties may mean may join a little bit later. So it's really sad, obviously, that we're not able to meet in person this week. These conferences are always a highlight of the year for me. But at least through this forum, of either hearing or seeing and hearing, depending on which of us you see, we're at least able to talk about the PPP market in Turkey. And as you all know, despite COVID, the PPP market in Turkey has continued apace. And as Sinem was saying before, there are new tenders that have been put out for airports, roads, and there's some interesting developments in rail as well as other areas. So we have with us today a fantastic group of experts in the PPP sector in Turkey, and we're going to discuss the question, is it still worth it? Is investing in PPP projects in Turkey still worth it? So on the panel with me is Murat, who's the head of investments and business development for IC Holding. He has over 20 years of experience in the sector and worked for many PPPs, such as highways, airports, seaports, marinas, and hospitals across the EMEA and in Turkey. We're also very glad to have Kerem on as well. He's in his 30th year of his career, 17 years in corporate and correspondent banking, 13 years as a CFO. He's been with Nurul for the last 10 years as the group CFO, as well as board member for Nurul Holdings and several other group subsidiaries. He led the Gebze-Izmir toll road project, financing negotiations, and has been very active and involved in the SPV's financial decision-making process. We also had Petro on the line, who's a director at SMBC Project Finance Department. He has 20 years experience in the sector, and has arranged PPP and power transactions across EMEA and in Turkey. He has closed Adana, Yozgat, Bursa, Ikatali PPP hospitals. Hopefully, Reza will also be able to join us. He's a senior executive with leadership positions who's had leadership positions in various leading banks in London, Paris, and Amsterdam, and Istanbul. And at the moment, he's with Natixis. So let's get started. I'll ask, so when we say, is it worth it? We assume that at some point it was definitely worth it. So let's first recap what made this market worth investing in to date. And perhaps if I'll pass over to Petro and ask that question, what made this market so interesting in the past?
So in the last, good morning all. So 6 or 7 years ago, the sovereign rating for Turkey was investment grade, was Baa3 from Moody's. The Turkish economy was very strong and growing. There was still a strong appetite from private insurances, ECAs, multilaterals, and banks, international banks in general as well. In Turkey, there's always been, as we have shared with my fellow panelists, world-class national infrastructure developers, and there's a very long history of investment from foreign investors as well. There's even a strong presence of foreign financial institutions in the country, European-owned or American-owned or Middle Eastern-owned banks. As mentioned before by my colleague at BBVA, there's also very strong legal framework, which has been very successful in the past and still is. Good pipeline, good outlook, and what more can you expect really at that point in time? So great time.
Yeah, and what sort of happened since?
Yeah, I think. We've read, Turkey's now, the rating for Turkey now is B+, which is lower than Greece. The 5-year CDS spread is below 400 basis points, where at the time it was probably 150. And CDS spreads, show what is the outlook for the country. it's a bit higher than Egypt and a bit lower than Oman. So, the Turkish lira is devalued by 30% year on this year, I think. So this is the face value that that we as international investors look at. But if we look a little deeper, we know we still have a very strong regulatory framework. We've got a PPP market that works. We've got public sector that is experienced. We've got excellent infrastructure developers in the country, plenty of experience, and I'm really honoured to sit amongst some of them. So that's I think in a nutshell what the situation is.
Yeah. And do any of the other people on the panel have any comments at this stage on where we've come from? If not, then perhaps I'll move on to, despite the challenges, we're still seeing, I think, large projects come to market with both local and international participation. And perhaps if I can pass over to you, Murat, can you talk about what you're seeing at the moment in the market in Turkey?
Thank you. I mean, as Pietro mentioned and previously Sina from Garanti mentioned that, I mean, last 10 years, there were enormous developments in the market. I mean, the size of the projects, the quality of the projects developed, sector-wise, from hospitals to railway, highways to airports, to seaports. All these were quite, let's say, most of them were challenging in terms of financing, in terms of development, and in terms of operation, but they have been successfully really achieved. And since then, as Pietro mentioned, regarding the bankability issue and the terms issue was the main criteria for the last years. But even this year, we saw a couple of projects coming up into the market, like an airport, which was just last week, Çukurova Airport, which has been just up there for a couple of years, and it was I think it was a very competitive tender, which was handled last week. Previously, there were highway projects coming up in the last years. But this bankability changed this year a little bit, the structure, moving from straight BOTs to PPPs to kind of EPCF financing projects. So, but I believe there is still a big opportunity, because the thing is the know-how and the experience has been established. I mean, previously we were experiencing in all our developments, international partnerships. In the airport, we were partnered with Fraport. In the highway, we were partnered with Astaldi, and because of their situation, they changed. Lately, we sold our shares in the airport to TAV ADP, again, an international partnership. So international initial groups, they still stay, and they are open for newcomers. I believe in this, the bankability and the market structure will make it quite available because of this know-how within the government and within the corporates, make it quite a good market. Turkish infrastructure market is a competitive and quite a good experienced market.
Okay, excellent. And I might pass over now and ask you, Kerem, because I think obviously it's been sort of almost 10 years, I suppose, since you signed the implementation contract for Gibraltar Izmir, and I suppose quite interesting. Would you sign that again? Would you go, if you knowing what you know now? Would you be keen to jump back in? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think I would sign again. Our experience on the whole has been extremely positive. Obviously, we've learned some lessons that we might apply if we were going to go through the same process again. However, in retrospect, we've had an extremely cooperative administration in terms of the highway authority, in terms of the treasury, and so on, who have been very cooperative in developing the project. And the bankability issue, ours was one of the first projects to come online. So it kind of served as a template for the projects that followed. And obviously that meant projects that followed had shorter times to reach financial close, because we had basically established the ground rules on how these PPP financings would be done. And then the following projects used our experience and our template documents to quickly do their financial closings. Now our project has also been in the operational stage, in fact, for the last 3 years now. And we are actually quite happy with the performance of the project. We are, in the summer months, at least, we come very close to the guaranteed traffic levels, which gives us hope that as annual growth of traffic continues, we will be able to surpass those traffic guaranteed levels by the Treasury in the coming years. Maybe not immediately, maybe not this year, next year, but certainly within the next few years in the medium term. Also, the structure has demonstrated its resilience when we were faced with the COVID situation, and then there was a dramatic reduction in traffic volumes during the lockdown period. Obviously, people were not allowed to travel, and it shows that the structure in place, whereby there is a traffic guarantee, and it is absolutely essential for these projects to succeed. Obviously, we don't want that kind of force majeure events ever arising again. But in particular, the toll road projects have been able to weather a force majeure event like that at the same time.
That's excellent, and that's really good to hear. And I think it's one thing I want to pick up later is the impact of COVID. But I think
we can discuss really more when the subject comes. I can provide additional details then.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, one of the panelists, Reza, has not been able to make it on the call today. But I did have a question for him, but perhaps I'll open it up for the group here. And so we've obviously seen this development in the market over the last 10 years. And now we're seeing new projects, as we sort of said, new roads, airports, etc. Are there any things that cast doubt in your mind or would give you pause about the bankability of these projects, or the perceived bankability risks of these projects by the international community? Or do you think that the fundamentals are still there, and that it's still, these new projects that are coming to market should be able to be able to obtain finance and get over and get up and operating in the current environment? Did anyone have any thoughts on that?
I can propose an answer to that. I think potentially what might concern international creditors is the FX volatility. As you know, these projects are dollar denominated. However, the dollar denomination is once or twice a year fixed, the Turkish lira dollar rate. That goes for the toll revenue, and that goes for the amount that the administration is guaranteeing in terms of how much it will pay per its guarantee scheme. Now, the FX volatility has caused some stress, obviously, in this scenario. If the companies have been diligent in their hedging strategies, and if they have undertaken the minimum hedges set by the creditors, and in fact, in our case, we overhedged also. So we hedged all of our debt service, the dollar TL. Then it's certainly a mitigant, and probably international lenders going forward will be looking at this aspect closer. But once it is mitigated through hedging mechanisms, even that should not be an issue. So there really is no reason given our experience in the last 10 years with these projects, and they're all working, why international lenders and investors should not be interested in these projects.
Absolutely. Murat, Pietro, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very happy to hear Pietro Reza, if you will, because the thing is, lately we don't see any, as Kerem said, kindly, and I appreciate they have these concerns of the currencies. But we don't see them even in the airport where there is no currency issue. There is the hard currency in those kind of transactions. I mean, there's no, in the highways, we have a guarantee, we have a TL tariff, but the exchange rate and then the US denominated tariff base, we have an exposure for sure. But in airports, there wasn't any. I mean, it's pure foreign exchange based transactions. And as well as that, I think lastly, in the last couple of years, government made a very good, during COVID, I would just jump into that one because that gives comfort to the banks, that the government served all these guarantees. I think Kerem will confirm that. They did very well and without any delay and very successfully. So the thing is, they stick to the contracts. And this was very, I mean, it was a high reputation. It was quite important. Why? Because we were discussing with various international investors to join to our projects. And that was a quite and remarkable action. And I expect and I'm willing and I foresee that the international banks will also start coming back soon. But they are not in the market, that we don't see it at the moment.
Yeah, and I share the view. I mean, we need to probably to recreate that environment that was maybe 5-6 years ago, where you know, the rating was investment grade. The banks were not maxed out, and international banks have supported quite a bit, all of them, the development on the infrastructure, and everyone has got a large exposure to Turkey, and the large exposure to Turkey can only grow if the conditions are better, if the outlook is better. And I think that's where, I think that's the conundrum a little bit. The pipeline is there, the experience is there, can you know, if at all possible, although they might be maxed out now, to increase their exposure to Turkey. I think that's the key point. Because everything else works fine. The FX mechanism works fine. The government is very supportive. They're very keen to see the private sector involved. So, but there is that bottleneck which needs to be solved first, I think.
Brilliant, brilliant. And perhaps if we, on that positive note about how things are working so well, where do you think things are going to go from now? And I suppose, like, where do you see the interest in the market coming from over the, say, next 3 to 5 years? Are we going to see, obviously we've seen a little bit of Chinese interest. Are we going to see more Japanese, Middle East, Europe, America? What are people's thoughts on that? Who'd like to sort of, maybe Murat, do you want to start off on that and what you're sort of seeing at the moment and what you sort of might be seeing in the future in that sort of sense? But okay. I suppose this is, but maybe also thinking not just about the banking side and the financing side, but also the equity side, which is which I think now that we're getting some projects coming through to full operations is actually, you know, something that could be quite interesting development for the future.
Sure. I mean, you're right. I think equity side is quite important as well. And international players, as Pietro mentioned very well, is like there is this experience in the market, there is the know-how already developed in the market, and all these developments have been achieved here. So international both finance and equity players will start moving on. I mean, we have been discussing with various potential partners. I foresee, to give you basic answer, is that Far East seems to be active, but slowly coming in. So they might speed up. But we shouldn't forget Europe is always, in terms of finance, in terms of equity, is a good source of potential investors and financiers who might join as well. And I believe they will also sort of speed up the process. I just think thanks to COVID, because there's a huge cash available in the market and mainly ready for the infrastructure. So stable, let's say, experienced, developed markets like Turkey, or the supply of, I mean, there is a pipeline of projects here as well. And this pipeline will help them find easily new projects to invest and to finance. And I foresee China, Japan, and also Europe as the main future prospects coming.
If I can add some points here, obviously we need to look at the future twofold. One are the new projects coming online, and two is the acquisition of the existing projects by fresh investors. Now, what we have seen in the market, again, I'm talking regarding my expertise field of the toll road projects, but perhaps to a certain degree, the same considerations are relevant for the other sectors. The first generation projects were all done by construction companies in Turkey. The reason being there were huge synergies between investing in these projects and getting an equity IRR at the same time as constructing these projects and getting construction profit, as well as additional mileage on your belt, as it were, because you need certain closures of projects to be able to bid for other projects internationally. So it was a great opportunity for construction companies. These construction companies are not necessarily operating companies. They are more interested in construction than they are interested in operating these assets. So this will open the field for international investors to come and purchase these assets. And we have seen a couple of these projects being offered in the market. We are also going through a process where we are looking into this. Therein, I think this is where the international players will lead a key role. Motorway operators, for example, who were not particularly interested in the outset at a greenfield project because they were not interested in taking construction risks and so on, and hedge funds and other infra funds, they are now keen to look at these projects because these are high IRR yielding projects. Also, Chinese acquirers. Every state in China has its own motorway operating company, and every one of those companies are interested in expanding their operations outside of their regions. They can't expand it within China because other regions are handled by other regional operating companies. So they need to go international. And I think in that sense, the Turkish assets provide a very good opportunity for them to look into it, and they are looking into it very keenly. So I think this is the way the market is going to go, a transition from the construction primary investors to operating and infra fund investors coming and taking these assets at the operational stage.
That's great. Pedro, please.
Yeah, just if I can digress a bit too much, but you know, the relationship between Asia and Turkey is well known. But and if you think about I can make an example. In 1889, I think the Ottomans sent a frigate, Ertugrul, on a goodwill visit to Japan because they wanted to expand the trade and strengthen the relationship. After 3 months of good diplomacy, the Ertugrul ship went back and it got stuck in a big typhoon in the Sea of Japan. 600 sailors died, Turkish sailors died, but islanders nearby, Japanese islanders, fishermen, helped them out and saved, I think, 70 sailors, Turkish sailors, and the Ottoman Empire was very thankful. In 1986, I think during the Iraq War, Iran-Iraq War, there were around 200 Japanese expats stranded in Tehran, and the Japanese military couldn't fly in because of some constitutional constraints. So again, the Turkish military came and saved them, and I think when the Japanese government thanked the Turkish government, the Turkish government reminded that they were thankful of the after rule experience. So I mean, and there's a similar story with Korea, where Korea is brother in blood with Turkey. So I think there's so much goodwill towards Turkey that at the right moment, the Asian investors will flock in, and banks will follow through as well. Sorry for this.
No, I think that's absolutely fantastic, and it sort of brings up another idea, I suppose. If we now have people starting to become interested in the market here, what are the existing players in the market here going to be doing? Are they going to be competing with these new players coming in from outside, or are they going to be starting to look at our opportunities? And perhaps Murat, you might want to take this one as to what do you think is going to happen in the market with the sort of those who've learned and got these skills now on how to develop these PPP projects? What do you think they're going to do with that knowledge they've got?
I mean, it already started, as Kerim mentioned as well. I mean, the initial investors were all main construction groups, but that's the history of the infrastructure investment worldwide as well. That's how it really moves on. I mean, it starts with that and then moves on to operation, moves on to further development. And Turkey passed that learning curve, so the experience moves internationally. So, I mean, for example, we have been involved in a lot of PPPs in Russia. I mean, either as an EPC contractor or together in an investor as well. Within the area, we are looking in the East Europe or the Middle East, because the experience gives the groups a very competitive EPC position, because they know the operation, they know the ORAT situation, they know the operation phases and the pass to that one, and they know, all these groups know what project finance and what these projects really can handle with. And the other thing is now the newcomers, it gives like the Chinese groups, as was mentioned, or other international groups. The Turkish group project brownfield ones here will play a good partnership role, or a jumping stone. I mean, together they will join here and to grow together in the region. That's the other opportunity, what we are discussing with the potential new groups, not only in Turkey, but within the area as well. Like East Europe, there are a lot of projects coming up, and or the Central Asian countries, they're also coming up with PPP projects. They started to make their changes in their legal frames and make some implementations with the experience of international bodies. So I believe the groups already started moving internationally. It was the initiated was the airport groups, which they already did. They have a lot of PPPs in the other countries. And now I believe it will be following by the highways and then seaports. All of them will come up. And the greenfield, the brownfield ones will be welcomed with further international groups to join as an equity new investors.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got about 10 minutes left on this session, and I think obviously the whole reason we're doing this session at the moment online is due to the effects of COVID, which have now been with us for be coming up to a year very shortly. And I just want to touch on that. I think we've already heard some really good experiences in relation to COVID, but I want to sort of get your sense, perhaps more broadly, as to how COVID is impacting on the market. Do you think it's going to have an impact? Obviously, there's all phases, the operational phase, there's the construction phases as well. There's the financing, there's obviously, the types of projects that may be coming up. And I just want to get your sense of how COVID might have a bit of an impact on our question of, is it still worth investing? So perhaps if I open up to you, Petro, first, as to what you're seeing, and perhaps even perhaps bringing to us a bit of knowledge about what you're seeing across the region as well in the context of COVID and PPP projects.
Absolutely. So back in March, all banks were concerned about what's going to happen. Will projects suffer cash flows, because that's what we are looking after. We're looking for. And I think Murat and Karim shared the experience in Turkey, which is even in projects with volume risk. So I'd like you just to be briefly bring in the example of leisure centres in the UK. Leisure centres, swimming pools, communal swimming pools built under a PPP scheme where a big chunk of revenues of cash flows come from the users. Of course, in lockdown, swimming pools were closed, and operators, equity investors, and everybody was under a lot of strain and saying, do we go in default? Do we need to shut forever these social infrastructure? And in the end, the UK government, but most of the governments have always said infrastructure is important. Infrastructure, we must maintain infrastructure, and they've covered to some extent. They've maintained alive these projects, which, as Jared mentioned, you mentioned, Jared, it's been a year or so. So the commitment of government to PPP is quite strong, I would say.
And Kerem, Murat, do you have any addition? Obviously, you've already touched on it a little bit, but have any predictions from your crystal balls as to how COVID might have an impact on the market, or any other things about how it's impacted to date?
Well, I don't think COVID is having any impact on those projects where the construction is ongoing. Turkish work sites remained open throughout the March to June first peak phase. They are all active now in the second peak phase. So work sites are fully active. So there will be no impact from that side. Also, on an operational side, even with the significantly reduced traffic during the first peak phase, we never for one day closed down the operations. It continued without any hindrance whatsoever. So from those aspects, no big issues. And obviously it might slow down the financing negotiations for those projects which are at the moment at the financial close stage, because as much as video conferencing is a very good alternative to having face-to-face meetings or physical meetings, I am myself not certain that it's as good as physical meetings. So you can get a lot more done, I believe, during physical meetings. So it might slow down the processes just a little bit. But otherwise, obviously, we're going to wait for the investment community who seem to prefer at the moment more cash assets, more liquid assets instead of long-term assets, to see how the world emerges out of the COVID era. But I think once we've emerged,
Okay, I think we may have a slight.
Yeah.
Okay, so perhaps I think Kerem's internet may have frozen for a moment there. But Murat, do you have any thoughts on this? Well,
I mean, considering the COVID is about to, let's say, past the worst case, still we are living the worst case scenarios. Of course, these days, a lot of the numbers increasing. But in terms of business, as it's not like the lockdowns in the first phase, we passed that phase. I mean, the seaports, we had troubles, airports, there were troubles, highways, okay, less traffic. So I believe we are more positive in terms of operations and in terms of cash flow in the all PPPs in the upcoming years. And secondly, in terms of investors, yes, at the moment everybody's looking for the short-term and cash rich, let's say, investment tools. But what I feel and I see is that the lot of cash injected by the governments internationally will create quite a good appetite for the infrastructure funds to look for pipelines of projects investments. So I believe our assets are quite good, which are existing ones, and also the upcoming new projects might be quite important for new potential investors, financiers, equity investors. So let's say I am more positive and optimistic for the next coming years.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point. I think whenever there's a financial shock or a financial downturn, and obviously the implications of COVID are certainly having impacts on the economies of countries around the world. We often see that following that, governments decide to try and build themselves out of it, and there's often quite a big infrastructure push that follows that. And so it would be quite interesting to see whether we'll see that maybe not just in Turkey, but sort of more broadly across regions and economies that are trying to deal with the effects of that COVID is having on their economies. So I think we're coming up to the time allocated to us. So perhaps just ask each of you to, obviously the question that we've been asked is infrastructure. Is it infrastructure investments in Turkey? Is it still worth it? Perhaps if each of you could just sort of perhaps give a small summary of what your thoughts are on that question and anything else you might want to say. So perhaps I'll pass over to you, Kerem, first. I hope yes, it looks like your internet is back now. Great.
Yes, I think my Wi-Fi broke down for just a few seconds and then came back online all by itself magically. So I'm here. Yes, I think it's worth it. I think I truly do believe, not because my company is an investor in these projects, but I truly do believe these projects are essential for Turkey's economic growth. We need this infrastructure in order to take Turkey's economy up to the next level. So that will ensure government's commitment to ensure that they are successful. And the prerequisite for the success is to ensure that the government will continue to pay on timely basis its obligations under these contracts. And there has been absolutely zero issues on that front in the last 10 years that these projects have up and developed. So as long as this is the case, and it does appear that by now the extremely established documentation for these projects, they are proving their practicality. It's working. It works. The projects are completed. They are being operated. Debt is being serviced. So why not? Why shouldn't they continue? Why shouldn't international investors be interested in these projects? Definitely, I'm very much in favor of it.
Excellent. Maybe I'll move on to you, Petro. What are your sort of thoughts on this to sum up?
I share very much what Kerem has said. I think that the bottleneck is always the outlook, the rating, and the perceived risk. Everything else has worked fantastically well. So I'm very close to my heart the project I've done in Turkey, and I hope I can do many more.
It's very good to hear. And Murat, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, as a group, as personally, I completely believe in that, and I believe there's a new era coming in Turkish infrastructure as well as international. So now the first era of development phase finished for these major projects. So now new era with new investors, new, let's say, joining to the club, and for the new pipeline projects, I think it's worth it, and it will be growing.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm incredibly pleased that the first session in this program has been so incredibly positive, and that we can definitely, I think, answer the question: is it worth it? With a resounding yes, it definitely is. And I would just like to thank the panelists for their time. I think it's been an incredibly interesting hour, and apologies once again for some of the technical issues, including, I think, my video, which I'm not sure what's the problem, but hopefully the audience has learned a lot, and it's been an enjoyable experience for them. So once again, thank you very much to the panelists for giving your time and your insight today. That's been fantastic.
Okay.